Yeah, I was your ministry going on. I visited to Sri Lanka last
Okay.
uh, 14th.
14th.
Yeah,
Okay.
I visited to Colombo and Jaffna
Yeah.
and nearby Jaffna places also.
I- uh, Is that your first visit to Sri Lanka?
Yes, yes, it was my first visit and very impressive. That is why I very thankful to Deputy Commissioner Sri Lankan Consulate Chennai, Mr. Venkateswaran.
Oh,
I
okay.
just
Okay.
arranged one investors meeting at Chennai. That
Yeah.
time only I got Mr. Krishnananda Padiraja's introduction, and
Yeah.
he said about Palmyra product, Palmyra Development Board Chairman. I
Yeah.
got a lot of opportunities to meet these entrepreneurs and industrialists from Sri Lanka at
Yeah.
Sri Lankan Consulate Chennai.
Okay. Great. Great.
Yeah, he only given your number and this all reference and about your ministry and everything, right, sir? I saw your. I went through your this one domain to know about what's reality and what's real going on. That's
Yeah.
everything is very fine. I viewed at the evening economic diplomacy and promoting the tourism, this boosting exports, this all. So basically, I introduced myself. I am
Yeah.
doing a journal, the Tamilakam Times YouTube channel,
Okay.
journalist, and
Okay.
apart from that, I am doing business,
Okay.
especially the petroleum products,
Okay.
lubricants and other things, right?
Yeah.
So I met some food product DP Global and food product manufacturers at
Okay.
Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
By invited by that company,
Yeah.
I came there, right? So from airport, Sri Lankan Colombo airport to till my destination, I gone through everywhere. Means I interviewed the local drivers and local people.
Mhm.
Really, I surprised what the really ground reality is totally different from the media broadcasted in India.
Okay.
I
Okay.
was very surprised because the nice people, very wealthy atmosphere, and all this there. And you kindly let me know what's the real scenario for your ministry. I wish to know about our investors in Indian investors.
You don't know about the situation in Sri Lanka?
Sri, situation I went through ground reality. It's very nice.
Yeah.
And what you want to say about our investors, Indian investors, to come to Sri Lanka and invest?
Okay. Okay. Well, at the moment in Sri Lanka,
Yeah.
uh, um, we are going through what happened was there was a financial crisis, which mainly was the result of the lack of dollars, and which I think was primarily responsible. There were three primary responsible reasons, maybe four primary responsible reasons. One is that we have not shown fiscal responsibility, the conservative governments, and so I think that caught up eventually. The second reason is that the balance of payment. There was a balance of payment crisis which was created mainly due to COVID. After the Easter attacks for 3 consecutive years, our tourism was negligible. We lost about 9 to 10 billion worth from tourist receipts net. I think totally we lost about 13 billion, and so that was, and then also the worker remittance. There was about 200,000 workers who came to Sri Lanka, and then which resulted in the with the balance of payment crisis, that the international rating agencies downgrading us. So usually we used to go for about 2 billion worth of sovereign bonds, and then the capital markets were not accessible to us. But also I think bad financial mismanagement. I think we saw that coming from the time of the previous government. The loans tend to be very our loans were manageable. I think but we had three types of loans, mainly the bilaterals, the multilaterals, and then also the international sovereign bonds. See, multilaterals with ADB and the World Bank, you obviously get the best rates and the best terms. The bilateral loans were more expensive. We had about 10% of our foreign debt was to China, and the other 10% was to before the crisis. Other 10% was to Japan, and then about 48% for the international sovereign bonds.
Okay.
So then roughly the other 30% were the multilaterals, the ADB loans, and the other donors. So when we during the previous government, that the international sovereign bonds was increased from 5 billion to 17.5 billion. And the rates were quite high, about 8%, 7-8%, which we had to pay, and so that was also another reason. And but I think also there's a great amount of responsibility the current government also needs to take, because the previous the finance minister and the central bank governor, they were hoping that that the economy will improve, and they were hoping that we will be able to provide a homegrown solution. So whereas many were of the view that the debt was unsustainable and that we should have gone to the IMF at an earlier occasion, and we didn't do that, and as a result of that, I think all these four factors contributed to, and of course the global economic crisis. I think also with the Russian war, things such as the war in Ukraine and all those things also didn't quite help. The energy prices have been very high, so those things also, the external factors have not helped Sri Lanka in that regard. And also because there was a delay in going to the IMF, so until we come up with a package from the IMF, until a restructuring package for our debt, and until we show that our debt is sustainable, we need to basically look at the friendly countries to help us through this period. And in that regard, India has stepped up and been magnanimous as a very strong neighbor, and they have helped us, and they have stated that they will continue to help us. I think that also goes to show the strength in the Sri Lanka's and India's relationship at this juncture.
Yeah, it is very nice, Minister. What you said is very right. When I came to Jaffna, I met one a professor, history professor, subject of history professor, and he's a journalist also. What he said is, he interviewed with me for very long time, 1 hour. Our meeting was at 1 hour. And in between my meeting, I observed something which I shared with you. You tell me about your view that more than 30 years war is conducted. The country has met the more than 30 years war. And the manpower, due to war, the Sri Lankans are migrated to abroad, other countries. So manpower shortage. These are the main impact for the economical crisis. It is not only because of existing president and PM. What he said is, it's a statement from the journalist and the history professor. What about your view about that?
mean, I'll have to go dig more into it. I mean, if there's a manpower shortage, yes, there are certain manpower shortages in certain areas,
Yeah.
but then we shouldn't be having unemployment in Sri Lanka, right?
Okay.
But I think it's what he probably meant was the brain drain.
Okay.
What I would think is that what he probably meant was that the talented people in Sri Lanka
Yeah.
have gone overseas for greener pastures, and we see and we hear them doing remarkably well in other countries.
Okay.
Yes, so I do agree with him.
Okay.
I do agree with him to that extent.
Yeah.
But we also need to it doesn't the way I see it, that the people who are in Sri Lanka,
Okay.
I don't think they're less talented, but what I would think is that now, let's say, if some of the people who are doing exceedingly well in other countries,
Okay.
I understand there was a lady, she's the Sri Lankan in Australia, Sri Lankan origin. She's in Australia. She's the highest paid CEO in Australia. Um, for a public company, and but then you need to ask the question: if she had remained in Sri Lanka, would she have risen to those heights?
Right.
And the answer, I would think, is yes. Of course, I'm not trying to take anything away from her
Right.
and her brilliance, but also for people, the Sri Lankans, when they go to other countries, and for them to succeed, is that those countries have better institutions in place, and
Right.
that is something which we need to do.
Okay.
We need to ensure that there will be opportunity for everybody in Sri Lanka.
Okay. That's right. That's right. And what would you like to say about Indian investors? Which are the segments, is potential segments to invest in Sri Lanka?
Well, I think irrespective of the economic issues which we have in Sri Lanka, there's a lot of interest in Sri Lanka, and
Okay.
India has been a very large investor in Sri Lanka. I would think there are certain areas which we can work very closely together. One, there are 5 trust areas which Sri Lanka is looking at, and I think in all of those areas, the India is involved in some way or the other. The
Okay.
logistics, I think, is will have a natural growth.
Yeah.
Because 87% of all the cargo, the containers which come to Sri Lanka are
Yeah.
transshipments, and most of them end up in India.
Right.
The India and Sri Lanka are now the Advani Group. They are going to invest in the Colombo port, the West Terminal, which is about
Yeah.
700-800 million investment. So certainly the logistics would be a very interesting area, given that if you look at the Hambantota Harbour, it's a deep sea harbour. The ships which are getting bigger and bigger now. The triple E class ships can dock in these ports. So this is one area. I think the ICT sector and technology sector is also another area. HDL came to Sri Lanka. They wanted to start with I think like 500 people, and then now they want to expand to 5,000 people. If you look at the salaries in, let's say, of a software engineer, and one in Bangalore and in Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan probably cost about 75%, the 75% of the cost of a software engineer in Bangalore. Now it's probably even more cheaper, and the aptitude is also quite similar.
Okay.
And we do have a lot of IT companies which do this niche market. We don't have the numbers such as where
Right.
big companies such as HCL, where they have about 100,000 people working for them.
Yeah.
But I know there's another one of the largest Indian ITC companies is also now looking at operating in Sri Lanka. So I think definitely, and when it comes to I think IT industry, I don't think it's just, I don't think it's just India. I think, we need to, all the South Asian countries need to work together. If you look at
Okay.
Bangladesh, you have 500,000, freelancers. Yeah, so we need to make sure that the freelancers in India, freelancers in Sri Lanka,
Yeah.
they are given that, the movement of mobility, and they can work anywhere else they want to work.
Yes.
And so this is that's the ITC is also another interesting area. And then we have pharmaceuticals.
Okay.
So we have set up 3 pharmaceutical companies. We spend about 800 million on pharmaceuticals every year, and it'll probably in 2 or 3 years time it'll be a billion dollar industry. And but we only produce 15% of our pharmaceutical needs in Sri Lanka. So we have put up 3 pharmaceutical zones, one in Anuradhapura in north of Sri Lanka for the things such as the pharmaceutical supplies and the like bandages and the that kind of the material. And then in the second one and the third one we have for the formulation and for things such as complex formulations, but also the one in the pharmaceutical. So in Hambantota we have these the environmental authority, the approvals, and all those approvals have already been taken, and we are also intend on using the common utilities to, let's say, to dispatch the hazardous material and things such as that.
வெறும் 82 ரூபாய்க்கு 1 லிட்டர் டீசல் நம் இடம் தேடி வருகிறதா? ஆம், இப்பொழுது ஃபியூவல் ஆன் காலில் இது சாத்தியம். இப்பொழுதே தொடர்பு கொள்ளுங்கள் 8489055555. அது மட்டுமல்லாமல் டிஜிரிவரில் நீங்கள் வாங்கும் பொருட்களுக்கு கிடைக்கும் பாயிண்ட்ஸ்களை கொண்டு ஃபியூவல் ஆன் காலில் தேவையான ஃபியூவலினை பெற்றுக்கொள்ளலாம். மேலும் தகவல்களுக்கு www.fueloncall.com இணையதளத்தை பாருங்கள்.
So I think the government is also embarked on an ambitious program to at least to ensure that 50% of our pharmaceutical needs will be produced locally. So there, I think, in time to come, there probably will be tariffs on the imported pharmaceuticals. So I think, if the Indian companies, some Bangladesh, two Bangladeshi companies already have invested in Sri Lanka. So I think the pharmaceuticals is also potential area to invest in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
And these 3 areas, then there are other areas such as energy. We have already been talking with India to see whether we can, the national grids can be connected. So then if there's any excess energy that can be sourced out. So the energy is also, and the Adanis, I think they have also committed to another 500 million renewable investment. So that's another possible area of investments. Then also, I think the one area which Sri Lanka has not cashed in, but there's tremendous potential, is the minerals. We have some of the best minerals in the world. But of course, not in very large quantities, but the quality of the minerals are very good. We are the only country in the world which has what's called vein graphite. Okay, it's the carbon content of the graphite is very high. It's about 99.9% in certain mines. We have thorium deposits, and then we have the phosphates, which is enough for the next 200 years. It's one of very large phosphate deposits, which we can produce fertilizer and things such as that. And then also we have ilmenite, and most of that ilmenite is exported to one Japanese company in its raw form. So I think if there's a lot of potential for value addition of the minerals in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
And then I think the other area is the manufacturing. There's tremendous potential for the manufacturing. Also, and I think there's particularly if you look at the Hambantota region where it's very close to the shipping lanes, and of course the final area is tourism. And I think India is the largest market at the moment.
Yes.
Our tourist arrivals has been fairly good. In March we exceeded 100,000. Now in April there is a dip due to perhaps the unfavorable the news alerts which are going out. But of course, I must state that the whatever the protests which takes place in Sri Lanka, they are very, very peaceful, and you see on social media some of the tourists also going and joining these protests. There's also a sense of like a carnival atmosphere for some of these protests. They are not like violent protests. Of course, it can lead to violence, so we need to be careful on that. But tourists, if you look at tourism, we haven't had any tourists from China this year. Okay, it used to be our second biggest market. So then we get tourists from India, we get tourists from China, then we get Russia and Ukraine. Before the war, they have been one of our biggest markets. Then we get tourists from the Western Europe, and then we also are working very hard to get tourists from areas like the Middle East and countries like Korea. So so it's not just for the Indians to come and visit Sri Lanka, but it's also for, I think they can have investments. So there's a lot of Indian investment in terms of hotels, and so the Taj Group was one of the the earliest groups to invest in Sri Lanka. So I certainly think that there's a lot of scope here for Sri Lanka. And I mean, of course, I'm Sri Lankan and I may be biased, but Sri Lanka is a very nice place to live.
I understand. When I visited your country, I understood. You're right.
Because if you look at something like the quality of air in Sri Lanka, well, it's getting bad. The quality of air in Sri Lanka is also getting bad. But I think it has that island mentality. Things are a little bit people are easygoing. People are very friendly. The food is great, and the weather is fantastic. And I think it tends to be more cleaner, and then it tends to be very the environment is it's perhaps very close to Goa, I would think so, or Kerala. So I think it's a very good place to live. If you look at it's a very good place for any expats to work, and for Indians. I think it's especially so due to the historical connections also, and it for sometimes the tickets are much cheaper from let's say Delhi to Colombo to Delhi to Chennai or some other parts of India. So I think there's a lot of potential for India and Sri Lanka to collaborate together.
நீங்க நம்ம போன தலைமுறையோட வாழ்வின் முறையை பற்றி என்ன நினைக்கிறீங்க?
அவங்கள நாம என்னைக்குமே பெருமையா நினைக்கணும்.
அவங்க வாழ்ந்த முறை, அவங்க ஆரோக்கியம், ஒரு நல்ல ஆரோக்கியமான வாழ்க்கையை வாழ்ந்திருக்காங்க.
அவங்க சமையல், அந்த காலத்து சாப்பாடு,
சொல்ல போனா 100 வயசுக்கு மேலயும் ஆரோக்கியமா வாழ்ந்தவங்களா இருந்திருக்காங்க.
அதே ஆரோக்கியத்தை நாம நம்ம தலைமுறைக்கு கொடுக்கறோமா?
இல்ல, டெஃபினட்டா இல்ல.
மாறணும், கண்டிப்பா மாறணும்.
Udaya cold pressed edible oils, value for good health.
Yes. What you said is very right. As a historical relationship between Sri Lanka and India, we have to reinitiate, rebuild, and we have to restart our business relationships between India and Sri Lanka. That's one of my industrialist who was at Colombo. She said that it is a right time to come to Sri Lanka and start the business. Do you think that, Minister, do you think that what are the protests going on? it's a very short time only, and it's artificial, and it is need not to happen. What do you think about it? It is the protest which is going on, because the investors will get fear. How long we can stability of the government, and how long our business will live if we come to invest in Sri Lanka. What about this protest is going on?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the protest tends to be, extremely peaceful, but the protest is mainly due to the shortages of gas and the electricity and fuel. If you look at in some areas, such as in Colombo, there are apartments which are about 20 stories, and these apartments has about 1,500 people living in them, and it's impossible especially in April, March in Sri Lanka to live in an apartment without electricity, and then the residents cannot use firewood for cooking. So there was a lot of frustration at one time. For a very short period of time, there was power cuts for 14 hours, and it becomes increasingly impossible for people to live. Most of the time, your kids are up and they are crying, and then you are very tired. You need to then go to work under such circumstances. So there was genuine frustration from the people due to the failing economic conditions, and also I think that the economic issue has brought political adjustments which needs to be made, and then I think the positive, the silver lining I think in this is that all the politicians have been talking that we need to bring the 21st amendment to reduce the power of the executive president, more in line with the 19th amendment, and there's been a lot of talk. I myself have suggested 5 points in Parliament, which the first point being that the MPs should be audited, and so that I think there will be new initiatives which will be taken to reduce things such as corruption. So those are positive things, and we of course need to have changes in the election system. We need to have more inclusive politics. If you look at in Sri Lanka, the Parliament, there's only 12 female MPs, so that's less than 5%. And if you look in comparison with our South Asian neighbors, so even if you look at in comparison with more let's say some Islamic countries, they do have higher representations than in Sri Lanka. So there are certain political changes I think which needs to come forth, and I am hopeful that this is the right juncture to bring the legislative changes which are required.
Okay, that is very best because I visited to your Colombo and Jaffna. I saw so many natural resources, and the country is very clean and sanitary, very nice. It was very looks very nice. And what do you like to say to the global investors, not only from India? So what are the ministries, how they can approach with the Sri Lankan government? Like your ministries under, I think the foreign investments comes under your ministry, I think. Is it right?
The investments does not come. No, it comes under the president, but we certainly facilitate the investors who are interested in bringing investments. No, I think for the global investors, I would give the same message as what I gave to the Indian investors. But I think everybody knows that for the next 20-30 years, that the growth will be in the Asia, and particularly the Indian subcontinent. Okay. Not only just India. If you look at countries like Bangladesh, they were doing quite well, and the other countries like Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, due to these, are having under economic crisis. But I think we will be able to come out of this stronger. And in Sri Lanka, there's it's the location. I think it's very vital, the Sri Lanka's location, and it's not only a 22 million market. You are talking about 1.8 billion in the Indian subcontinent. Okay, India alone 1.3 billion, and if you add the other countries, Pakistan, roughly about 1.8 billion. So we have a FTA with India, we have a FTA with Pakistan, and then we are negotiating a PTA with Bangladesh. We have a few agreements with the SAFTA agreement and with the Maldives. So I don't think you need to necessarily look at Sri Lanka per se, but you need to look at the entire subcontinent. So given all the
வெறும் 82 ரூபாய்க்கு 1 லிட்டர் டீசல் நம் இடம் தேடி வருகிறதா? ஆம், இப்பொழுது ஃபியூவல் ஆன் காலில் இது சாத்தியம். இப்பொழுதே தொடர்பு கொள்ளுங்கள் 8489055555. அது மட்டுமல்லாமல் டிஜிரிவரில் நீங்கள் வாங்கும் பொருட்களுக்கு கிடைக்கும் பாயிண்ட்ஸ்களை கொண்டு ஃபியூவல் ஆன் காலில் தேவையான ஃபியூவலினை பெற்றுக்கொள்ளலாம். மேலும் தகவல்களுக்கு www.fueloncall.com இணையதளத்தை பாருங்கள்.
Sri Lanka is I would say like not so intimidating. If you go to some place like Mumbai or something, and there's 20 million people, it's a world on its own, and so it's a good place to do business. It's more freer island, and we are now quite strong in our infrastructure. Most of the infrastructure is being built at the moment. So and the location, as I mentioned, it plays a vital, important role. The education levels in Sri Lanka are very high. There's most people. They wanted to have some sort of tertiary education. So and the Asian culture, in the Asian culture, it's that there's some sort of pressure from the the parents to also to excel well in your in your studies and to do well in your education. So all those things are there in Sri Lanka. So I think all the positives are there. It's just that we are going through a bad period, and I'm sure that our country has been a country of resilience, and I'm sure that we will come out of this, and particularly with the help of our strong neighbors. So I'm very optimistic with Sri Lanka.
Yes, it is very nice to hear from you, and I also hope, very strongly hope on Sri Lankan's environmental changes, especially the economical changes, because the citizens, the Sri Lankans are very friendly and cultural nature. So I stayed at Colombo for 10 days. So I visited so many places. So it is very nice place. Why the medias are exposing something different from the ground reality? Because the ground reality is totally different. I understood, because I went through all the local areas and other things. So all the best to your country to come out soon, and we reinitiate, rebuild, and we restart our business with Sri Lanka from India, and we will definitely contact with you, communicate with you for future business and other times.
Thank you. So next time you come to Sri Lanka, please give me a call and we'll meet up.
Sure, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.